What happens when one of Hollywood's most respected and private actresses comes face to face with a talk show host known for pushing boundaries and thriving on controversy? What you are about to hear is the moment when a routine daytime television interview spiraled into something far more explosive, an on-air confrontation that caught producers off guard, silenced a live studio audience, and left viewers at home stunned. This is the story of how Joy Behar pushed a conversation too far, why the tension in the room became impossible to ignore, and how Jodie Foster's calm but powerful response ultimately changed the entire tone of the show. Before we dive into the details, make sure to hit that subscribe button and share your thoughts in the comments below. This is one of those moments that sparks debate long after the cameras stop rolling, and trust me, you're going to want to weigh in on this one. From the very beginning, the atmosphere inside the View studio felt different. As the cameras rolled and the audience settled in, Jodie Foster took her seat across from Joy Behar. What was expected to be a standard promotional appearance quickly began to feel tense. Foster was there to discuss her latest directorial project, a deeply personal and emotionally layered film exploring themes of family trauma, generational pain, and the difficult path toward healing and redemption. It was a project she had spoken about thoughtfully and carefully in previous interviews, but Joy Behar appeared to have other intentions, leaning forward with her familiar, disarming smile, one that often masked sharp commentary. Joy shifted the conversation away from the film itself. She began by referencing the movie's heavy subject matter, mentioning family dysfunction, abuse, and long-standing emotional wounds. Then came the pivot. "It makes me wonder," Joy said pointedly, "if you're drawing from personal experience here." Jodie Foster shifted slightly in her chair. Though she remained composed, the question clearly caught her off guard. Choosing her words carefully, she responded diplomatically, explaining that all artists draw from life in one way or another, and that the story resonated with her because many families struggle with communication and understanding across generations. For a moment, it seemed like the interview might return to safer ground, but Joy wasn't finished. "No," she pressed, her tone sharpening. "I'm talking about your family specifically." The room seemed to hold its breath. Joy continued, referencing Foster's past with unsettling specificity. Her complicated relationship with her mother, the pressures of child stardom, and even invoking the traumatic shadow of John Hinckley Jr. And the public scrutiny that followed. The implication was clear and deeply personal. The studio audience fell almost completely silent. At the table, Whoopi Goldberg glanced uneasily toward Sarah Haynes, both visibly aware that the conversation had crossed into uncomfortable territory. This was no longer an interview about art. It was an interrogation about a life Jodie Foster had fiercely protected for decades. Foster's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. She remained silent for a beat, the weight of the moment hanging in the air, as producers scrambled behind the scenes. What happened next would redefine the interview, and remind everyone watching why Jodie Foster has earned not just respect, but admiration in Hollywood. Joy leaned back slightly, her lips curling into a faint, dismissive smile as she waved her hand in the air. "Oh, come on," she said sharply. "You can't hide behind the art forever when you're clearly putting your own trauma on screen for the world to see." The comment landed with force, and before Jodie Foster could respond, Joy pressed forward again, her voice growing bolder. "I mean, let's be honest here. Your mother essentially handed you over to Hollywood when you were just a kid. That's what happens to child stars, right? They get used up, chewed up, and everyone pretends it's normal." A ripple of discomfort passed through the audience. Cameras continued rolling, but their movements became hesitant, almost unsure where to focus. This was live television, and the interview was now dangerously close to spiraling out of control. Joy wasn't finished. "And then," she continued, lowering her voice just enough to make it feel more cutting, "when that obsessed fan tried to assassinate a president just to impress you, where was your mother then?" The words hung in the air like a slap. For a brief moment, the entire studio froze. You could hear the hum of the lights overhead, the faint rustle of someone shifting in their seat. Jodie Foster remained still, her expression unreadable. When she finally spoke, her voice was calm, but there was unmistakable steel beneath the surface. "Joy," she said evenly, "I think you're confusing an interview with an interrogation. She paused, choosing her words carefully. My mother was a single parent raising 4 children. She did what she believed was best to support our family. She protected me throughout my career and helped me make decisions that allowed me to grow into the person I am today. Joy let out a sharp laugh, shaking her head. Protected you? She scoffed. Is that what we're calling it now? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like she threw you to the wolves and collected the paycheck. And now, years later, you're making films about family trauma. The connection seems pretty obvious to anyone paying attention. The other co-hosts were now visibly uncomfortable. Whoopi Goldberg leaned forward, clearly preparing to step in. Maybe we should know. Joy cut her off abruptly. Let me finish. She turned back to Foster, her intensity renewed. I think our viewers deserve honesty. You've built this image of yourself as this private, dignified actress, but really, you're just another damaged child star who never dealt with her issues. And now you're projecting them onto your work and expecting everyone to applaud. That was the moment everything changed. Jodie Foster stood up slowly, removing her microphone with deliberate calm. The studio fell into complete silence, the kind of silence that magnifies every breath, every movement. When she spoke again, her voice was quiet, but it carried to every corner of the room. Joy, she said, I've been in this industry for over 50 years. I've worked with directors, actors, and journalists who understand the difference between curiosity and cruelty. She held Joy's gaze. What you're doing right now isn't journalism, it isn't entertainment, and it certainly isn't professional. Joy's face flushed red. Oh, so now I'm unprofessional, she shot back. I'm asking the questions everyone else is too scared to ask. That's what real journalism looks like. Maybe you've been surrounded by men for so long, you've forgotten what a real interview feels like. Foster didn't respond immediately. Instead, she turned to face the camera directly, her composure flawless despite the chaos unfolding around her. To anyone watching who has survived trauma, she said calmly, who has built something meaningful from difficult experiences, don't let anyone reduce your story to entertainment. Your journey belongs to you. Then she turned back to Joy and to you. Foster continued, her voice firm. I hope someday you learn the difference between being provocative and being cruel. There's a reason people trust me with their stories, and there's a reason they're starting to question whether they can trust you with theirs. The cameras caught everything. Joy's expression flickered, confusion, anger, and perhaps, just briefly, something resembling doubt. The other co-hosts sat frozen, unsure whether to intervene or allow the moment to unfold. In the control room, producers debated cutting to commercial, but the sheer intensity of what was happening kept them glued to the feed. Joy recovered first, her media training kicking in even as her judgment seemed to falter. Leaning back in her chair, she smirked. Trust me with their stories, she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. But by then, the damage had already been done. Joy didn't retreat. If anything, she doubled down, her posture stiffening as her voice sharpened. Please, she scoffed. You've been hiding behind carefully crafted answers and polished PR language for decades. I'm trying to have a real conversation here, but you're acting like this is some kind of royal audience, like we're all supposed to bow, smile, and ask you harmless little questions. Jodie Foster remained standing, one hand resting calmly on the back of her chair. The shift in the room was unmistakable. What had once been a familiar host-guest dynamic now felt unrecognizable. The studio no longer resembled a talk show set. It felt like a courtroom. Foster stood composed and resolute, the dignified defendant. Joy, by contrast, had taken on the role of an overzealous prosecutor, driven less by truth than by the thrill of confrontation. Joy, Foster said, her voice low but unmistakably firm, you're confusing real conversation with public humiliation. There's a profound difference between asking thoughtful questions about someone's work and trying to psychoanalyze their entire life for entertainment. Entertainment. Joy snapped, her voice rising. This is a talk show, Jodie. Entertainment is literally our job. But apparently you think you're above all that now. Too refined to engage with the regular people who actually watch this show and buy tickets to your movies. Whoopi Goldberg finally leaned forward, sensing the situation slipping beyond control. Maybe we should slow this down and no. Joy interrupted sharply, her hand slicing through the air. Let me finish. She turned back to Foster, eyes blazing. I think our audience deserves to see what happens when someone comes on this show, acting like they're better than us, like their pain is more sacred than anyone else's. The camera zoomed in on Foster's face, capturing the exact moment her patience ran out. There was no dramatic outburst, no visible anger, but something changed behind her eyes. A decision was being made. You want to know about pain, Joy? Foster asked evenly. Real pain isn't something you parade around for ratings. It isn't a talking point or a gotcha moment. Real pain is quiet. It shapes who you are. It teaches you empathy. It makes you careful with other people's hearts. Oh, spare me the lecture. Joy rolled her eyes. You're sitting there acting wise and wounded, but at the end of the day, you're just another actress selling a product. And that product happens to be built on your childhood trauma. Don't get mad at me for pointing out the obvious. Sarah Haynes shifted uncomfortably, desperation creeping into her voice. Maybe we could talk about the technical aspects of directing. Sarah, please. Joy snapped. The adults are talking. She turned back to Foster. You came on this show to promote a film that's clearly autobiographical, and now you want to pretend asking about it crosses some imaginary line. That's not how this works. Foster stepped closer to the table, her presence commanding the entire room. You're right about one thing, Joy. This isn't how it works. Professional interviews, respectful conversations, basic human decency. None of that seems to work for you. The studio fell silent. Crew members froze mid-movement. Even the audience seemed afraid to breathe. I've been coming on talk shows since I was 13 years old. Foster continued, her voice gaining strength. I've answered thousands of questions about my life, my work, my choices. I've dealt with paparazzi, tabloid lies, and people who believed my privacy belonged to them. But in 5 decades of public life, I have never encountered someone who seems to take genuine pleasure in trying to hurt another person on live television. Joy opened her mouth, then stopped. You keep saying you want a real conversation. Foster went on, but real conversation requires respect. It requires listening. It requires caring about the human being across from you as more than content. She paused. What you're doing isn't conversation, Joy. It's performance, and the performance is cruelty. Joy laughed sharply, though the sound lacked confidence. So now, I'm cruel because I ask hard questions, because I don't treat celebrities like fragile glass. Welcome to the real world, Jodie. People have opinions about your life, whether you like it or not. Having opinions and weaponizing someone's personal history are not the same thing. Foster replied, and the fact that you can't tell the difference explains a lot about what this show has become. The words hit like a punch. What this show has become, Joy shouted. This show has been successful for over 25 years. We've interviewed presidents, Nobel Prize winners, world leaders, and now some actress who hasn't had a hit movie in a decade is lecturing me about television. The insult hung in the air, and everyone knew it was a mistake. Foster smiled for the first time all morning, but there was no warmth in it. You're right, Joy. I haven't had a hit movie in a decade. I've been busy directing films that matter, working with artists who respect their craft, building a body of work I'm proud of. She stepped closer. In my world, people show up prepared, they treat each other with respect, and they understand their job is to serve the audience, not their own ego. My ego? Joy stood up, abandoning her chair and stepping toward Foster. You're the one acting like you're too good to answer simple questions. I answered your questions, Foster said calmly. I talked about the film, about healing, about trauma and recovery, but that wasn't enough for you. You wanted blood. The two women now stood face to face in the center of the studio. Cameras captured every breath, every micro-expression. The co-hosts watched helplessly, like witnesses to a slow-motion collision. You want to know what I wanted? Joy's voice cracked. I wanted honesty. Hollywood is built on damaged people selling their pain, and I wanted you to admit it. Foster didn't hesitate. I've never pretended otherwise. I've acknowledged my struggles. I've grown from them. I've turned them into something meaningful. She met Joy's eyes. You are using other people's pain as weapons, and you're calling it honesty. It isn't. It's exploitation. Joy's face shifted. Anger, confusion, defiance, and finally something quieter. I've spent my career giving people a platform, Joy said weakly. Fighting for justice. Then why? Foster asked softly. Is your instinct to tear down instead of build up? The question landed. For the first time, Joy had no answer. The admission lingered in the air longer than anything Joy had said during the entire interview. It was, perhaps unintentionally, the most honest moment she had offered, and it exposed the fragile motivations beneath her aggression. What had begun as an attack now looked unmistakably like resentment, long buried and finally erupting under studio lights. Jodie Foster's expression softened for the first time, not in triumph, but in recognition. She wasn't looking at an enemy anymore. She was looking at someone unraveling. Joy, Foster said gently, her voice noticeably quieter now. I understand feeling undervalued. I understand the frustration of working hard and feeling like your efforts go unnoticed. She paused, letting the words land, but taking that frustration out on guests isn't going to fix it. It won't give you validation. It will only make people stop wanting to sit across from you. So that's it. Joy shot back reflexively. You're never going to come on this show again. You're never going to work with me again. The sharpness was still there, but it lacked its earlier venom. This wasn't an attack anymore. It was defensive, almost wounded. I don't know, Foster answered honestly. That depends on what you do next, whether you can learn from this moment, or whether you choose to double down on the behavior that brought us here. Joy looked around the studio, seemingly seeing it clearly for the first time. The audience sat frozen, their faces no longer animated by drama or spectacle. There was no laughter, no anticipation, only the uncomfortable stillness of watching someone come apart in real time. This wasn't entertainment anymore. It was exposure. You really think you're better than this show, Joy muttered. The words came out weaker than intended. Better than this format. Better than these questions. Better than me. I don't think I'm better than anything, Foster replied evenly. I think I deserve basic respect, just like you do, just like everyone sitting in this audience does. The difference is, I'm not willing to trade that respect for ratings, outrage, or whatever you think this confrontation is achieving. Sarah Haynes, sensing an opening, finally gathered the courage to speak. Maybe we could talk about the hopeful elements of the film, she suggested carefully. The message it offers to families who stop. Joy snapped, turning sharply toward her co-host. Just stop trying to fix this. She gestured angrily at the table. You all sit here every day nodding along, letting guests say whatever they want, never pushing back, never asking real questions. At least I'm trying to do journalism. Joy added, her voice rising again, though it sounded more brittle now than aggressive. Is that what you call this? Foster asked calmly. There was no sarcasm in her voice, only genuine curiosity. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're having a very public breakdown and using me as your emotional punching bag. The words landed with surgical precision. The silence that followed was profound. Joy opened her mouth to respond, closed it, opened it again, and then, almost visibly, she deflated. Her shoulders sagged, the fire drained from her eyes. You know what? She said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Maybe you're right. Maybe I am having a breakdown. She exhaled shakily. Maybe I'm just tired. Tired of pretending that what we do here matters. When people like you make it feel like we're beneath you just for showing up. The admission stunned the room. Foster responded immediately and unexpectedly, with compassion rather than victory. Joy. She said, stepping slightly closer, what you do here can matter. This show reaches millions of people every day. You have the power to educate, to inspire, to bring important conversations into homes that might never hear them otherwise. She paused, letting the weight of responsibility settle. But you can't do that if you're more focused on tearing people down than lifting them up. Joy looked at her, truly looked at her, as if seeing the situation, and herself, from the outside for the first time. The anger was gone now, replaced by something rawer and far more dangerous, self-awareness. The cameras continued rolling. The audience remained silent. Even the crew seemed reluctant to move, as if any sound might shatter the fragile honesty that had finally emerged. This was no longer an interview. It was a reckoning, and in that moment, under the harsh lights of live television, Joy Behar was forced to confront something far more uncomfortable than any celebrity guest. The possibility that the cruelty she called hard questions was really unresolved bitterness, and that the line between journalism and exploitation had been crossed long ago. For Jodie Foster, the exchange ended not with anger, but with clarity. She had drawn her boundary, not just for herself, but for anyone watching who had ever been reduced to a spectacle instead of treated like a human being. And for the millions watching at home, the moment would be remembered not as scandal, but as the rare instance when live television stopped performing and started telling the truth.